Hello Littletonians, welcome to this edition of Bookbusters. My name is Luke Formicella, and while normally Bookbusters is a middle school production, today I will be joined by 5 other high school and middle school students to discuss a few preview chapters of this year's Littleton 300th Anniversary textbook. I will turn it over to Morgan with our first discussion panel.
Thanks, Luke, and welcome to our first segment. I'm Morgan.
I'm Alana.
And I'm Victoria.
And right now, we're going to be talking about population of Littleton, Mary Powers, and climate control of Littleton. So, I want to discuss Mary Powers first. Do you want to give a little brief description of what happened to Mary Powers?
Okay, Mary Powers was a resident of Littleton, and she is known for she was kidnapped by Indians, and it turns out it was her rather than Mary Shepherd. But anyway, the supposed Mary was on a hill, and she was keeping watch for the Indians, but the Indians attacked and kidnapped her and killed Jacob and Isaac Shepherd, who were working in the fields. And the Indians took her back to their camp, and in the middle of the night, she took the saddle that the Indian leader of the kidnapping was sleeping on, and put it back on the horse that they were riding, and rode back to her family. And the horse was conveniently from Lancaster, so the horse knew how to get back home. And so then she warned her family of where the Indians were, and that's sort of the story behind Mary Powers, or this Mary, anyway.
I thought there's one section in it, and I thought it was really interesting. It's which Mary? So they were debating whether it was Mary Shepherd, Mary Powers, or Sarah Shepherd. Sarah Shepherd was 2 years old at the time it happened. Mary Shepherd was 6, and Mary Powers was 13. So it was more likely that it was Mary Powers. I don't think a 2-year-old would do that. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Mary Powers was also known for being very mischievous, and known for not really following the rules, because she's apparently led this spiking of the punch with tobacco leaves. And she was known and she led various other jokes on her family, and so her parents, I think her uncle was like, her parents must have their hands full with her. So she's the most likely, and she's Mary Powers, which was the niece of Jacob and Isaac Shepherd. And then that's why there's a road called Mary Shepherd.
One thing that I noticed was that there were some parts of the story that I didn't quite believe, like the one where she took the saddle from under the sleeping Indian's head and put it on the horse and rode off. I don't know about you guys, but I think I would wake up, yeah. So I thought that was kind of, hard to believe about that. And if she was really trying to escape, she would have, just rode off, right off on the horse, just bareback,
Yeah, if she was desperate to escape, she would just ride bareback, but she took the saddle. And
and it was really lucky that the horse knew where to go.
Yeah. Conveniently from Lancaster, and conveniently stopped in Littleton.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew where her family was.
But it's still a nice story for Littleton to claim as its
a really
own.
nice story.
Stone commemorating it off of Great Road, near the bonsai tree shop. Even though no one knows what it is, it's okay.
Is there anything else about Mary Powers that you want to discuss?
No.
Okay. So next thing is population. I thought that was really interesting because in the timeline, in the little section that we got, with the timeline, it would mention the population, and I thought that was really interesting. So the first, where it first mentioned the time period of the population, it was 1790, excuse me, and it was 854 people. And then in 1800, it jumped to 1,059 people. And then 1810, it just backed down to 773 people. So that was, big dramatic kind of difference. And then throughout 1820 to 1880, it stayed around 900 people. And then in 1890, it went back up to 1,025 people.
1890 is also interesting because we were a very farming sort of town, and we had 1,000 people, but 1,100 cows. So that's a fun fact.
Wow, cows.
Yeah.
More cows. People. And then, like from 1900 to 1930, it stayed. It jumped up like about 100, to 200 people. And then in 1950, it went up to 2,000 people. But then what really was interesting was, I thought was really interesting was between 1950 and 1960, it jumped up about it went from 2,000 to 5,000 people. So I don't know what,
What happened?
Yeah, it just went boom, So yeah, and then it kind of went up by 1,000 people every 10 years. And then the last time it was mentioned, the time period, it was 2010, and it was 8,924 people. So that's
We've made a lot of progress.
yeah, still really small though. But when we compare to other towns, it's nice. So now, do you want to talk about climate in Littleton?
Sure. So the microclimate in Littleton is the Nashua River Basin and the Sudbury Valley watersheds. And it's slightly different than that of Groton and Harvard, because Groton and Harvard are more hilly. So, and in Littleton, there's approximately 100 acres of flat land, which attracted a lot of the farmers. And the flat land yielded a slightly longer growing season, more comfortable winters, and easier paths for wagon travel. So a lot of farmers came to Littleton and with the longer growing season. And it also, you can tell the difference in the climate, even according to the small hills that we do have in Littleton, that certain winters are 1 to 2 weeks longer on top of the hills in comparison to down here.
Yeah. I thought that section was really interesting because I hadn't realized that weather differences were so obvious, the towns right next to each other. And it said winters are more comfortable and stuff in Littleton than Harvard and Groton. And I didn't know that you could tell that in towns with such close proximity.
So we're just assuming that, if Groton doesn't have school, then we won't have school. It's it's just the same. But in reality, when you get down to it, and with the farmers and everything, that it's very specific, and that different weeks can actually change, what plants you can, how long they'll grow and when they'll bloom and everything. So I thought it was very cool how just a few handful of miles affects your growing season as a farmer.
It's like the ice storm in 2008. I know it affected some other towns more than our town, so Littleton. So
even though they're just a couple miles.
yeah, it's just really interesting. So yeah, that is it for the first segment. Thank you, girls, for being in this. Let's go to the second segment.
Welcome back to Bookbusters. This is a new segment. I'm Lori, this is Luke, and this is Ruth. Today we're going to be talking about more of what Littleton was like in terms of bigger events that were happening in the nation. So why don't we start talking about how Littleton was known for being a praying Indian town? Anyone got anything?
Okay, so John Eliot in the 1650s came over from Europe, and he worked to Christianize the Native Americans of the area into the Neshoba plantation. And so he would translate the Bible into the native languages, and he basically created Littleton as a praying Indian town to assimilate the Native Americans.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. The book does talk about this, and it references Littleton's, Native American history, but it unfortunately kind of ignores the I guess, the Native Americans' perspective of the white colonists coming in, and John Eliot coming in and changing like the Native Americans' way of life. And like, for example, the Mary Shepherd story that was brought up in the first segment. So she did end up telling the colonists like where the Native Americans were, and the book just kind of ends with it, with the white people going to go see the Native Americans. And well, this was the interactions with the Native Americans and the colonists were often like not very peaceful. They were tended to be violent on both sides, and the book tends to just kind of focus on the violence committed by the Native Americans rather than the white colonists.
Huh. I mean, yeah. So, should we talk about Deer Island? Maybe get into that with assimilation? What do you think?
You want to do it?
Okay, so during King Philip's War, also known as the French and Indian War, Native Americans were viewed very skeptically by the white colonists in the area and in neighboring towns. So they were sent off to Deer Island because they were viewed as if they couldn't be trusted because they might be loyal to the hostile native tribes surrounding the Littleton area, even though most of the Neshoba Indians were very peaceful toward the white colonists living in Littleton at the time.
Yeah. So, going forward a few years, why don't we talk about the Civil War and what Littleton's part was in that?
Yes, so the Civil War had a massive impact on the entire country, and Littleton was no exception to this. And so they did have many men who did go out and fight in the war for the Union. And then the women, who I always kind of consider like the unsung heroes in different war situations, because they didn't, women did not go out and sacrifice their lives in the same way that the men did, but they also did have a serious contribution to the helping support the Union during the Civil War. They were responsible for making the uniforms, like sending the supplies. There were some that were nurses that would have to like take care of the wounded soldiers, and Littletonian women also took part in this. There was an organization called the Littleton Soldiers Aid Society, and that they provided some of the, I guess, aid and the different supplies that I mentioned. Like they all had to make the uniforms for the soldiers because the government did not supply them, and yeah, they had a big contribution to the Civil War.
That's actually very good. When I had read it, I really enjoyed reading about just what exactly they did. I heard they would collect clothes, they knitted quilts, they sent out food, everything really. They just go around and collect so much money, and they did make a huge change for our town. So I thought that was really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was cool to see for a town that really didn't have the population to send enough men over down south. The women's organizations and the church organizations really sent quite a bit of supplies compared to our population.
Yeah. So, any other comments that you guys have for tonight? I have a good one. All right, I'm going to bring up this little topic of names. So many of the streets in our town, for example, Goldsmith, we have Whitcomb Ave, Hartwell, Harwood, they're all named after people who kind of made a change in our town. A lot of the founding families, for example, have roads. Whitcomb, Kimball, Bulkley, you can find them really anywhere. But one that I was really surprised about was Eliot. Because John Eliot came in, he translated the Bible for the Indians, he did so much for the town, and I haven't seen a street with his name yet. So I was very surprised by that. And if you looked on a lot of the maps, you could see there were people, only really the rich people, you could see their houses on the maps. So a lot of the names there we still see in our town today, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because John Eliot, he played, I guess, such a vital, role in the praying town, and Littleton takes pride in having a praying town, and it's on there's a Native American on the town seal, and it's just interesting that he was just kind of like not added for, like he wasn't given a street like so many of the famous Wiltonians were.
Yeah, because I feel like when we had read the book, there were he was mentioned so many times.
Yeah.
It was like every other paragraph was like, John Eliot did this, and he did that. And then all of a sudden, it's like he kind of disappeared. So I thought the name's very interesting.
Yeah, and most of the names were the first families to purchase the land off of the Native Americans in the area, which is very interesting. I know Whitcomb, I think, made the second purchase, and he bought about half of the Littleton area, so
Yeah,
that's
so
very interesting.
we have a lot of thanks to them for the land that we have today.
And
a
our
lot of
nice farming land.
Oh, yes. And a lot of the names, too, were very interesting. Like, I think one of my favorite one was Thanklord. I think, was it Thanklord Shepherd? She was married to Ralph Shepherd. There was also Nahum Whitcomb. They were very interesting names, and I really liked how today they're so different. Like, most of the girls that I think we read about were named Mary. And I think now we only have a few Marys in our town. So it's kind of interesting to see how names change over there, even though they've been so popular in our town.
Yeah.
So is that all for today, guys?
Yeah.
All right, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you for watching our discussion about Littleton's past 300 years. We hope you enjoyed learning about our town's history from a teenage perspective.